Hi, everybody. Hi, welcome, welcome, welcome. Hello to the world. Thanks for joining us on this little virtual coffee session with myself, Stefan Alvarado. I am the director for the Certificate in Regenerative Entrepreneurship at the University for International Cooperation. So today we've got a little bit of a special treat for you folks. Uh, we want to take you a little bit through our thinking in terms of what regenerative development is, how does regenerative entrepreneurship fit into that, and share more about our marvelous program, the Certificate in Regenerative Entrepreneurship, which henceforth I'll be referring to as the CRE because it's a bit of a long name. So now that we're speaking the same language, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So I'm just gonna pull up my presentation. I don't see you on my screen for what it's worth, so it'll be impossible for me to respond to the comments as they come. But please do just leave them in the comment section. And so after this little bit of presentation, we're gonna have a bit more of a conversation. If you've got any questions about the program, that'll be the time to ask them. So let's kick off with the meaty stuff. What is regenerative development? Well, really, it's a form of development that focuses on creating enabling conditions for the well-being of life. And life with a capital L. And its development across these 6 areas that you see on screen, across spirituality, across the economy, across politics, across society, across culture, and of course, Mother Earth, nature. Now, what does this mean to develop and create enabling conditions? Well, in some simpler words, we're here, like many others who are doing good work in the world. We're here to eradicate poverty. We're here to create good, dignified jobs. We're here to revitalize biodiversity and environmental health, as well as societal bonds, and overall uplift human consciousness and really act through love and compassion. And by working across this interdisciplinary matrix of different sectors, we really do have a good shot at doing it because we can no longer afford to work in silos. We need to extend the interconnectedness of modes of development. So it differs particularly and significantly from other conventional forms of development that are, generally speaking, have their priorities set up for economic growth. And not always the good kind. It tends to be reduced just to GDP growth. But there's much more to economic development than growing our GDP. It's also not the same thing as saying sustainable development because regenerative developers or folks in regenerative development understand that there is a very precarious state in planetary life systems. They are very, very degraded, and we need to actively heal and restore them. And that's what the image on the right is showing us. It's really a different positioning of humankind towards development and our role in this planet, much more akin to being guardians of it. So, although it's intuitive and perhaps obvious, I said a big word at the beginning, which is life. And I think it's worth clarifying what we mean by life. Um, I'm gonna do a little bit of a process check here and just hand Tanya, my co-host, power, so if anybody comes in, she can let them into the room. Okay, so we keep going. So not just life, but living systems. So what is life? Well, life is that funny thing that happens between birth and death. And it's generally conceived of as a biological process that has some interesting characteristics, biological processes related to metabolizing, processing nutrients, reproduction, making more of ourselves, homeostasis, ensuring some degree of sustainability and stability in the system that lives uh, in favor of growth and development. And fundamentally, it is complex. And it is in this complexity that we can really move into what we mean by living systems. And there are some particular principles that we've identified define these living systems. And this is not just us saying, but there's a broad range of erudites, academics studying and practitioners studying what this really means. And so we're taking here Fritjof Capra's systems view of life perspective and adding a little bit of these principles. So what are some of these principles that define living systems? Well, life freely self-organizes itself in ecosystems. It is quite prone to autonomy and freedom. Life is inherently regenerative. It is intrinsically creative. It is intrinsically intelligent. It exists in terms of its interrelationships. It is not separate. And it is sacred. And we need to move forward with this understanding if we really want to develop forms of doing business that help create the conditions for life on Earth. So then what is regenerative entrepreneurship? Well, it's a way of doing business that generates value for all life on the planet. If we go back to the root of the word entrepreneurship, it doesn't necessarily relate strictly to business, and that's not how we want to understand it in the CRE. It refers to a word in French that means to undertake that which generates life-affirming conditions. So we can find entrepreneurs in really all sectors of society and all industries, from politics through to environmental conservationists, through to industrialists, technology development, NGO spheres. What I really want to hammer in with this is that more than it being a noun, a thing, it is a verb. It is a way of doing things. And because it is a way of doing things, it is a part of how we see the world and our relationship with it. So based on this, really, we just want to make sure that it is clear to all of us listening that we can't remit ourselves to think of regeneration and regenerative entrepreneurship only in those fields that relate directly to how we engage with Earth, which is fundamental and it is extremely important. It's really at the root of how we carry out the way that we do our enterprises and administer them and make them grow. But it extends beyond that. So in general, we want to focus on not just doing less harm, but making sure that we're doing more good. We're not just trying to reduce pollution, we're trying to restore systems. And we're not here to exploit resources and opportunities, but we are here to cultivate human and systemic potential in their proper context and scale. Now, how do we do that is really the key question that we're here to learn. And it starts with leadership, a style of leadership that is loving, that is regenerative, and that is ecosystemic, and gets focused and put into action through these 6 principles of action and design. Number 1 being developing business models as circular value and capital flows. Linearity doesn't cut it anymore. A great example of this is the Indian company industry, which I'll just leave here, how they manage their operations, what their value chain looks like. And as you can see, it starts at the seed and ends at the market, right? It means we need to foster empowered relationships between all stakeholders. And this is something that the Dutch company Buurtzorg does immensely well. A cooperative of nurses that have a high degree of autonomy and decentralized operability that are not restricted to following the centralized orders of a hospital or something, leading to extremely incredible results in the way that these nurses administer quality of life for their patients. We need to make sure that we have connection to context and place, particularly our inhabited bioregions, that territory that we are living in, which is something that Balcar Earth in Catalonia does extremely well, where they incubate their businesses in their communities relative to the needs of their territory, of how water flows through their territory, of how geography shapes interactions between different societies and communities, and how that leads to the creation and generation of certain cultures. We need to make sure that we are abiding with the principles of trust, truth, and transparency, which is something that a collective that I'm a part of, known as ReFi or Regenerative Finance, does really well through the attestation and validation of impact via blockchain, which is immutable, intransferable, cannot be changed, and is publicly available. And it means it requires courage. And we need to make sure that we're innovating and adapting for ecosystemic resilience, something that the city of Amsterdam has really understood deeply. Generally, the Dutch know this very well, having a country that is a couple of meters underneath the sea level, needing to plan for that resilience, for that increase in sea levels, but also making sure that their local economy works circularly. And then there's the cultivation of human potential, something that a certification like a great place to work can let us know. It's not a guarantee, but at least it tells us that the place that we're working with and through cares about us as people, as individuals. We're not cogs in a system. We are whole beings with dreams and desires and challenges, and we need to be acknowledged and recognized as such. Now, who else is doing business this way? Well, a fair number of us. Here's just some other examples. On the nanoscale or small scale, a huge reference for us, an ex-student of the Certificate for Regenerative Entrepreneurship, Antero Bejarano, an Ecuadorian jeweler who is an entrepreneur and has a disability, and he's a regenerator, working with people in his territory to use jewelry as a way of rescuing and solidifying the identity of their communities and their connection to the land, and creating jewelry using recycled materials. On the mesoscale or medium scale, we have initiatives like Fairphone, where they develop technology and create good jobs, creating cell phones with fair trade materials, respecting every single person and creature in their supply chain. And a big example is the Mondragon Corporation, which is an industrial cooperative in the Basque Country in Spain. So how can we measure how much regeneration we are achieving? Well, there's many ways to do this, but here's a couple pointers. Some well-being indicators. Happiness. How happy are we with what we are doing with our work? Do we have a sense of purpose at work? And we can collect this information through surveys and interviews. How do we feel about the future? Are we optimistic about it? This leads us to want to work, want to be creative, to want to be innovative, and need no external motivation, or let's say sticks, because it's all carrots. We need indicators of economic efficiency, right? How much savings are we generating from circularly recovered assets? How much waste we are preventing from going into landfills or into the ocean? How much value are we generating over the customer's lifetime, right? And how much inequality are we reducing? This is something that the Gini index can tell us. Economic inequality. And some wildlife indicators, right? In ecosystems, the presence of keystone species such as bison or jaguars tells us that the trophic chain, the food chain of our ecosystems are healthy and there is enough energy for all this life to be there. How much life there is in that soil, the presence of microbiology, worms, bacteria, mycelium, all that stuff that we need to create healthy soil to grow our food. And of course, the cleanliness of water. How clean is this water that we are drinking? Is it polluted by radioactive chemicals, or is it fresh out of its origin in the mountains? And is this the kind of water that everybody is drinking, this fresh, clean water? So the invitation for us here really is to learn and transform through the certificate in regenerative entrepreneurship. And that ability to define and measure these indicators that I've just shared is just one of the skills that the CRE is fostering. And our program is designed to enable and transform, to enable a personal and systemic transformative experience by cultivating those regenerative entrepreneurial capabilities. It's all about transformation because we know deeply in our bones that we need to change the way that we're doing things at a personal and societal scale. As Facundo Cabral, a great Latin American singer, used to say, we either change or we disappear. So what are some of those other skills that we need to cultivate that are much needed to ensure the success of us regenerators as entrepreneurs. And these are just some of the skills that we're learning in the CRE. We're learning how to match products to market demands. We're learning how to define pricing and payment strategies. We're learning how to create powerful and attractive brands, how to generate viable and wise business strategies, how to structure our business management and decision-making models in regenerative ways, how to manage these projects in agile ways, how to deepen our personal connection with our territory, how to transcend a reductionist mindset towards an expansive and comprehensive one, how to design products, services, and systems based on natural and ancestral wisdom, how to enable the ability to work and lead ecosystemically and with love, and fundamentally, how to align our inner being with our desired external actions. How do we do this? In an 11-month program that is divided into 4 modules where we work along with 30 entrepreneurs to develop one personal project. We learn in this bilingual program that counts with live interpretation from distinguished educators, such as Mark McElroy, a hallmark of multi-capital accounting that has advised the United Nations for true cost accounting, fundamental to the development of a truly regenerative and fair economy. From Melina Angel, a biomimicry resource that knows how to transform the knowledge that and the wisdom that nature offers us into viable cultural, societal, and business strategies. From Dr. Four Arrows, an academic and scholar that has been studying the intersection of how to bring indigenous wisdom into education and into our everyday lives so that we can live happier, more whole lives. And Ronald Sistick, a referent in organizational regeneration in Latin America. We have a ton of tools that we want to give you because we know that this is what we need. Just in the project management sphere, we offer a living systems design thinking workbook with a regenerative project management framework that includes making a business case and a project charter that can guide us to the success of our projects. In terms of business, marketing, and product design, a regenerative business model canvas with a value proposition canvas, types of fit. How do we fit our product into the market, into the channels of distribution, into the models that we're working with as a company? How do we define clearly those buyer persona and brand archetypes is something that we want to answer desperately through these through the provision of these frameworks. On the accounting side, how do we account for multiple capitals flowing? So here's the multi-capital scorecard. How do we look at the life cycle of our products and services? So a life cycle assessment framework. How do we segment our markets effectively? And how do we pitch our business messages and stories in ways that inspire clients to work with us, but also bring in investment? In terms of living systems navigation tools, ecosystem mapping methods, and 7 vortex to really give us the tools to reduce complexity to manageable bits. World Mandala to make sure that we're considering all the different factors in the way that we're deploying and designing our strategies. And collective visioning and resilience planning exercises, because we need to be able to prepare ourselves for the future. And what is risky is not the same as uncertain. So how do we manage that gap? And many interdevelopmental tools such as nature communication exercises and the cat-fawn method from 4 Arrows, concentrated activated transformation, focused on the way that we deploy our attention, our words, and recognize our internal nature, and many, many more. The key that will put your knowledge to practice into this program is the Regenerative Project, and where we provide an enabling space to practice what is learned by investigating, envisioning, and prototyping a bioregionally rooted enterprise that is actively designed to heal and generate prosperity for all of our participants' territories and our communities. And the project development segment is scaffolded by the project management framework that UCI teaches, for which we are known globally. And it is strongly informed by a living systems design perspective, and supported by a strong community of practitioner mentors that can help us along the way. So we have 4 modules that we work these the regenerative project through. Number 1 is the living systems design thinking, where we, and I'll show the curriculum in just a moment, but at the end of the day, deliver a business case with a reflection entry to make sure that We're rooting the development of our project in true market demands and true ecosystem needs by having interviews with our potential clients and beneficiaries. In our second module, which is focused on alternative development and economic approaches, we create that project charter that sets us up for success in the way that we execute our projects. In our third module, we carry out an exploration of how to transform entrepreneurship and the organizations that we work with. And we do a progress evaluation. We deliver a progress evaluation on our project charter that really informs even more deeply. And finally, in our final module, which is about transcendence, how do we achieve individuation and unity, we deliver a final presentation, a pitch. Once again, the 4 modules, and now the curriculum. Oh, actually, never mind. Before that, we focus on cultivating 4 key competency areas that enable us to do this holistic work, starting off by inner development, right? How do we act from love? How do we develop deep consciousness? How do we develop the capacity to think in terms of opposites and find and synthesize a higher truth that enables us to think the highest thoughts and do the highest deeds? How do we relate better to one another? How do we resume being nice as humans to each other and to all other life forms on Earth? And how do we get to collaborate effectively? These systemic competencies that can help us build these new enterprises and these new systems of regenerative, economic, social, cultural, environmental, spiritual, and political development. And bridging competencies, because we recognize that we are in the change of an era. How do we point towards a future that is worth living, and how do we inspire people to go there? Because the more people go there, the more likely it is that that will become the future that we step into. The first module has 9 classes that take us through what is going on with the planet right now. What is the mindset shift that we need to undergo to understand deeply the type of work that we want to be doing and need to be doing for the world? How do we understand ourselves deeply? And how do we manage our internal worlds in a regulated way? In Connect, we look at the economy. How do we plan for scenarios? How do we design products and services for circularity? How do we story our places and tell the story of the places that we are in? When it comes to transform, we look at all the tools that we can bring into our organizations today, and we look at case studies. Everything from financing methodologies and structures, through to marketing and branding, through to ensuring product market fit, market model fit, all the types of fit that we need. How do we generate empowering and enabling management conditions that can inspire our teams to do better, feel good, and be innovative and creative and be successful? How do we define those new regenerative business strategies and business models that will mark the way that business is done in the future? And we learn from a lot of practitioners and experts. And finally, unity with individuation. How do we step into a place where we recognize that it's not just about us, but it is about our relationships, and it is about our dreams, and it is about the way that we engage with nature and the way that we recognize the value of ancestral and indigenous knowledge to help us navigate these troubling times. We've got some graduation requirements, of course. We need to hand in all 8 deliverables, attend 75% of the sessions, and carry out that final presentation. And upon graduation, we accredit you with a certification from the UCI and the Global Accreditation Council. We give you the option to get certified in design thinking as well at an extra cost. And we are working to create an acceleration contest for Costa Rica-based projects. Overall, The program starts on November 5th. Sessions run weekly on Wednesdays from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Costa Rica time. This will be a bilingual program with live translation, and the cost is $1,500 for Costa Ricans and $2,800 for non-Costa Ricans. We invite you to enroll and really take this as the opportunity that it is to create a livable future. Thank you. That's the end of my presentation. I'm going to stop sharing right now, and I open up the floor for any questions that you may have. If this resonated with you, if you know people that might be interested in it, if you yourselves are interested, here's where the cafe part really begins. That's it from me. Thank you. We've got scholarships available as well for folks that are living in the Americas. Tanya, if you can help us with that link, and I will share a link to our landing page so you can share and distribute with anybody who might be interested. Scholarships range from 90% to 50% to 30%. Thank you. Menno.
I, is it especially for Latin America, for South America, North America, and Asia because of the time when it's when everything is scheduled? Because now it's about 12, I think, noon. And here in the Netherlands, it's 8:30 at the moment. And of course, we have winter time and summertime and stuff. But is that your focus at the moment?
At the moment, this is designed particularly for inter-American cooperation. That is correct. However, even at this time, I will say we've got Spanish folks in our current cohort that are doing the work. Oh, you know,
Because
time flows differently in Spain. I know.
I know, they have dinner at 9 or maybe 10.
Right,
So
right.
that's, we have dinner at 6, and even when you're going up north, you have dinner at 5. So
Yeah, that's right.
yeah. So that's
But if you're interested, I mean, we're still also looking up. Well, I mean, we were going to have an opening that was more directed towards the European, to our European folk, but
mhm.
nobody enrolled. So we decided to kind of merge the program all together, and focus on the Latin American and inter-American cooperation. If you're still
Okay.
interested, next year we'll have a different opening and a different time, and it'll be much more comfortable for Europeans. Yes.
Okay, because at the moment I'm part of the regenerative leadership course by Laura Storm, also related to the book of Laura Storm and Gus Hutchins,
Hmm.
and they have sessions early, yeah, no, not early morning, but yeah, they are both in Europe. She has also a colleague, and we have sessions from 9 to 11 or something like that, and then
Hmm.
from 3 to 5. So, different parts of the world can join, and they do the same. And sometimes they have a guest, and yeah, they just plan that. And then it will be recorded, so you can always see it. But it's just a practical thing because it's I'm it's still recorded, right?
Yeah. We can also